and welcome to another regular scheduled Sunday talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. We had one this morning at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, which we do once every month on the third Saturday morning in our time zone, of course.
And it
Sunday
only
morning.
felt like 6:30 a.m.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to do our best to get through this talk. So, yes, every third Sunday, every month, we do our other talk. So you can join us twice in one day for that third weekend. All right, anyway, I am one of your two hosts, Nora Kyle.
And I am the other one of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us. We have a few people here live. We realize that it is Easter and also Passover weekend. So some people
And
may not be
Ramadan.
able to join us. Yes, this whole month is Ramadan, and it's fascinating actually because it is not often that all of these holidays fall within the same season.
Yeah, the three great Abrahamic religions all have their highest holy days right now. So what do? They fight.
Yeah, you can check out the news for that. They'll fill you in. Um, do we need to do a little bit of a spiel, Mushta?
Do we need to do a spiel? Okay, so if you're watching us on YouTube, welcome. We're really happy to have you. If you haven't subscribed to us, it would be wonderful if you subscribe. There's a little button right down there. You can just click it. It doesn't hurt. You don't get a zap or anything. You just click subscribe and you're subscribed to our channel, which I mean that and $5.45 will get you a terrible cup of coffee at Starbucks, but at least you get the subscription to the channel.
Yes, and we are getting closer and closer to our goal of 1,000 subscribers. So thank you to everyone who has subscribed thus far. You are helping us out greatly, and every day we look forward to seeing our numbers and how much closer we've gotten because we always get a few. You all are amazing.
Yes.
And if you have any questions or remarks or responses or thoughts that you'd love to share, you are always invited to leave comments below, and we will do our best to answer every single one that we get, including the snarky ones. You know, sometimes we get those too, but we
Yeah.
appreciate that because it helps us grow.
Yeah, and
So
hopefully you
thank
don't
you.
mind a little snark back.
Yes, Wish Talk's very good at that. Part of his charm. So, with that said, I suppose we can leap into our topic this evening. What do you think?
No,
No?
no, because we forgot something very important.
Forget.
Uh, we forgot to tell all of you who are listening, and all of you out there in YouTube land and every place else in the universe, that we do this. All of these talks that we do, all of this information that you probably won't find much of anywhere else, purely by donation. And times are hard right now for everybody. So we know that if you're listening to us, your food bill has gone up, your gas bill has gone up, everything has gone up. And so it actually pains me to suggest that you might want to consider donating to the upkeep of the channel. But if you do have a few extra coins or dollars laying around that you don't need to feed your family, because obviously your family comes first, you could drop it in the poor box on your way out. You'll find a little
You'll
envelope.
find that link in the description below. And if you are super enthusiastic, you are welcome to purchase a t-shirt as well, which has a link also below in the
Yeah.
description.
And you can always comment. We would love it if you commented. We love hearing from you. So let's remind you again, think about commenting for us and liking our videos. Like our videos, please, like our videos.
So
Does that
thank
is
you
that
very much.
is that wheedling enough?
I think we've done a good job of
Okay.
wheeling. Yes. Well done. All right. So as you all know, even in our logo, we have this thing, this weird shape. It's a triangle with some lines inside a circle with a little creature in the center. This is called an Enneagram. And we use it fairly constantly. You may have seen it elsewhere regarding personality tests and other things of that nature. We want to tell you how we use it and why it is important to the work
Yeah.
as we understand it here.
Tonight, less how we use it or how we use it and more why we use it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's why the Enneagram? What the heck? There
And we don't
are,
get to talk about that as often. So
yeah,
here's our opportunity to dive into that.
yeah. So are we ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay, after you.
After me, huh? Get us started, Mushak, and I am right behind you.
All right. Let's start with something that Mr. Gurdjieff said about the Enneagram. We should note that the Enneagram, as it is known today, was only introduced to the public about 100 years ago. 1916, actually, I think, is the first time that Gurdjieff publicly mentions the Enneagram. Um, and he described it thusly. The Enneagram is the fundamental hieroglyph of a universal language which has as many different meanings as there are levels of men. So let's start with taking a look at that. The fundamental hieroglyph of a universal language. What do you think that means? First of all, who knows what the word hieroglyph means? And if you say picture writing, you're wrong.
Sydney is amused.
Sydney is what?
Sydney is amused.
Good. Being that she has to take care of a baby all day, anytime I can make her laugh is a good thing.
Right. So,
All
how
right.
should we think about this hieroglyph thing?
Hieroglyph comes from two words, or two, I think it's Greek roots. Uh, Hiero means God or gods. Glyph means sign, God signs. So, in choosing this particular word, he could have said ideograph, he could have said any number of different words, but he chose hieroglyph. And we know that Mr. Gurdjieff never did anything just randomly. There was always method to his madness. So, God writing, God words, God signs, the fundamental God sign of a universal language. And then he goes on to say, and there are as many different uses for it as there are levels of humans. So, do we have any sense of what that means? You can guess. I don't mind.
Sydney says, well, Levita says the language is context based.
Almost undoubtedly.
Right. And then Sydney says meanings can change as level of being grows.
Hmm. And we have to assume that this particular symbol does not have to do with the mundane as much as it does with something greater, you know, God signs. So, who here, oh God, I'm definitely dating myself. Who here ever played with a slide rule?
A slide rule.
Slide rule. Anybody here ever? No, Levita, you were my only hope.
Before my time, just a wee bit.
Yeah.
I heard about them, but I got there they were just as they threw them out, that's when I showed up.
Yep. When Texas Instrument came out with its first pocket calculator.
So, shall we describe it a little bit?
Yeah, a slide rule is usually a three-piece thing, though there are circular slide rules, and they're very, very interesting. But the most common one looks like a ruler, but the center section of it is movable, and it has a little thing that slides across, so you can, and it's marked with gauges. So you can move the center part and you can find a correlation using this little clear slide thingy with usually a red line, sometimes a black line down through it. And with this, you can add, subtract, multiply, divide, do square roots, do logarithms, do quadratic equations. You can do tables using this thing, which you can't do with a pocket calculator. You can't do tables. You can do tables with the slide rule.
So yeah, it basically looks like a ruler with several rows of numbers. Each of those are different mathematical, what's the word you would use, Mushak?
They're ratios, basically.
Yeah. So they align for a reason. As you slide this middle piece back and forth, you can see the relationships between these different ratios of numbers. And you'll see why that is reminiscent of the Enneagram as we continue this discussion.
Yeah, the Enneagram is a tool in the class of slide rules, in that you can plot all sorts of different things on it. And you can use it in a number of different ways. I have gotten several comments on various videos of people saying, hey, but what about the this in the Enneagram or that in the Enneagram? You're not doing it the way I've seen it done before. And this is true. There are a number of different ways to use the Enneagram, and what we have taught publicly so far has been two versions. The Enneagram of Pure Process, which is we show by teaching the kitchen and such things. And then an Enneagram of relationships between ideas, which is a completely different way of doing the Enneagram, but they fit together nicely. So we have the kitchen making dinner. We have the errors in information according to Ibn Khaldun, which are not the same kind of process. They're a different process, but they can also be mapped out on an Enneagram. As we go along, I only know probably a dozen different ways to use the Enneagram at this point. I am looking forward to learning more because there are more that one can know. But it's incredibly flexible when you learn how to when you learn how to use it.
Yes. The Queen says, cool subject. Yay, I'm glad you think so. Yes. Because ultimately, you know, the why that we use it has a big part to do with the fact that Mushtaq mentioned processes. Processes are kind of like, one circle around a life cycle. That's one way to think about it. And when we talk about the process of the kitchen, for instance, we're going through the life cycle of producing a meal and sharing it with others, and then preparing in the kitchen for the next circle. And this reflects so many aspects of our world and of our experiences.
Yeah. And so in the beginning, we teach this first Enneagram, and we teach it in two ways. The first way is, how do you complete a process? This is important because this begins to develop your will. And without having a will that is developed enough that you can use it, you don't get anywhere in life. And then the second way that we teach the use of this particular Enneagram of process is how to predict the future. Not in the mystical crystal ball way, but in the, what are the greatest probabilities of outcome if I initiate this action? So you can have the Enneagram of the kitchen, of creating food for your community. You can also have the Enneagram of cheating on your wife. And you can take and run that Enneagram through without ever cheating on your wife, and notice that at the end of that Enneagram, you're going to end up not as happy as you were at the beginning, no matter what you think. It shows the inherent problem of doing something dishonest like that and the consequences thereof. Now, I know some people are going to be saying, well, I've been cheating on my wife for years. Hasn't hurt me yet, that you know of. But yeah, so the ability to future pace, the ability to be able to go, what is the outcome? What is the potential outcome? Because it's always potential, it's never absolute. But what is the outcome if I choose to take this path? And that alone makes this tool priceless. Does that make sense?
Now, if you'd like a specific how we go through this process, I think we have some other videos that we can
Oh
link
yeah,
to.
I'm going to link
Yes.
to the entire Enneagram playlist at the end of this video, so you can go through and
Yeah.
learn the things that you want to do. This is not to teach you how tonight. This is going to explain to you why we use it and why you might like to use it. And within the videos that we have put up, you can learn the basics of it. And that, I mean, we aren't asking you to pay, what is it these days, $2,000 for a course in the Enneagram or things like that.
Or some weird ritual or whatever the hell it
Yeah,
is for
yeah,
$5,000. Yeah.
yeah. We aren't asking any of that stuff. We're just saying, here, take it, use it. The world needs it right now. And so that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is relationships between ideas. You'll find an example in our Enneagram playlist of Miyamoto Musashi's, yes, Levita, one weird trick. Miyamoto Musashi, in the end of his Earth chapter in his Book of Five Rings, gives 9 precepts. And you look at it and go, 9 precepts, I bet you that would fit on an Enneagram. And if you fit it on an Enneagram, you see things about those 9 precepts and how they relate to each other and how they inform each other and how you, as the student, can use each of these 9 ideas for your own development. So you got that going for you. If you're wondering what I'm doing, Nora got one of her hairs on me. Nora's hair are very, very long, and one of them got behind my glasses and is hanging on my face, driving me crazy.
They're everywhere.
They are. They have a life of their own.
So, Musashi, 9 precepts.
Yeah, interrelated ideas. And you start taking the Enneagram and you look at these various things and you go, can this fit on an Enneagram? take any book you've ever read, whether it is a fiction or nonfiction book, and see if it will fit on the Enneagram. The plot of it, that is. And the answer is yes, if you're clever enough, it can. So,
Do we have a visual?
no, I didn't do any visuals for
Yeah.
this.
So if you are seeking a visual, all you have to do is look at any of our thumbnails for videos or our logo.
Do we
It's
want a
right there.
visual? Ah, here's a visual for you. Here's the Enneagram of Musashi's
Oh,
precepts.
perfect. Okay, so as you can see, we have the 9 points here within circle, which is the cycle. You know, that's the linear part of all this. Then we have green lines, which show you the relationships between these points. And we can, if you go to the video about Musashi's precepts, you'll learn more about the nuances of that. And then we have this triangle in the middle.
And the triangle represents the shock points.
So these are the places where you are having some real interactions with the world outside of you, either through your will or through, you know, the influence of the outside world acting on your process. And of course, you also have the inspiration at point 9 to begin the process in the first place. The impetus, if you will.
Yeah, so there's the Enneagram. That's what it looks like. We have our own patented, copyrighted, trademarked Enneagram that we use that represents us. But anybody can draw one of these out in just a few minutes. Now, what else? I'm going to stop the share here. What else can the Enneagram be used for? Any of you guys think of any other purposes?
I would call in Sydney, but I know she kind of has to be quiet right now.
Yep. We will assume that Sydney knows all of the answers to all of the questions. She just ain't talking. All right.
Yes, Levita says, Sydney says, one day, of course, one day, Sydney. Levita says, relationships between things.
Yes. That is the hardest because things don't move. Mr. Gurdjieff said that the Enneagram is moving, that a still Enneagram is basically worthless. It can't tell you anything. It's a dead Enneagram. So the Enneagram, in order to be useful, has to move. And things tend to be kind of fixed. So to see the movement between things is a very high order use of the Enneagram. Here's something Mr. Gurdjieff said, and I keep coming back to him because he is the guy who introduced this modern iteration of the Enneagram to the world. There were different versions of it before him, but the diagram that we see now is his own creation, I'm pretty sure. Or he got it from one of his teachers. It's unique, and we have not run across it anywhere else. And I talked about that with the Pythagorean Enneagram, and you can refer to that video if that's something you want to know. So, you can use the Enneagram to determine the level of a person's knowledge, including your own, which can be
Yes.
embarrassing.
Yeah, well, right here, McQueen says it's a diagram of the way.
Yes.
Jayesh, we will touch on your question shortly. Yes. So, comparing knowledge, you said, Mishtar.
Yeah. Gurdjieff said, if two dervishes met in the desert, they could, and if they were of the right order, they could kneel down in the sand and draw out an Enneagram, and through discussing it, determine which one of them was greater in knowledge. And that one would be the one who would temporarily take on the role of teacher during that meeting for the sharing of knowledge. And that's actually true. Sounds weird, but I have had this experience myself. In my younger years, being stumped, not knowing how to answer questions. And in my later years, I remember this one guy who's doing these Enneagram teachings. He's of a particular Sufi order that claims to be the origin of it. And he couldn't answer any questions about it. And definitely nothing original. One of the things about the Enneagram is that it can help you create original thought because it gives you a pattern upon which to lay your thought that is workable. If you take an idea and you move it through the Enneagram from beginning to end, it will, in most cases, be a valid idea, be both sound and valid.
So, as Jayesh asks, how is it about God's sign?
You want to take that one?
I guess one way that I would answer that, it's certainly not the only answer, is that it is a way pointer. It is a way to understand the phenomena that happen around us in such a way that the beauty in them becomes all the more obvious. They seem to make sense. They seem to fit a pattern. They seem to have their own, design and particular orchestration.
Yeah. Because you're young, you never experienced the closest thing to a real answer in this. But I can tell you, when I was a kid, there were radio shows rather than TV shows, because hardly anybody had TV back then. One of my favorites was The Shadow. Now, if you followed The Shadow, you could send in for a decoder ring. And then every week, The Shadow would give you a special secret code that only you with your ring could decode. And it was the coolest thing ever. I would sit there next to the radio, moving my decoder ring around and coming out with the answer.
Lee McQueen was playing along with you.
Yeah. And the Enneagram is like that. It's God's decoder ring. So you get a message from the divine. You take out your Enneagram and you figure out what the message means and what to do with it. That's one of the really important things about it.
What do you think, Jayesh?
So conceptually, it's understandable, but how to do it? So I need to go through the videos.
Ah, so here's the thing, the radio is always playing. There's never a moment when the show is not playing. So how do you listen to it? So if you want to hear the radio show, it's like right now, there's all this noise outside. If I want to hear Kyle talk, I have to learn to tune out that noise and focus on her. If you want to hear what the shadow is doing this week, you need to tune out all the other noise and focus on the shadow. And if you want to hear God's message, you do the same thing. So this gets to your self-remembering. When you're in a state of self-remembering, then you're listening to the station, or you can begin listening to the station. And then life gives you the messages, and you use the Enneagram as the decoder ring to figure out what those messages mean. Does that make sense?
Good.
Holy books are also good for this. You take a sacred text and you read it, and then you lay out what it says on an Enneagram, and you follow the paths, and you use that to decode the text. Does it work every time? If you're clever enough, yes. So, what all have we touched on? We've touched on processes. We've touched on the interrelationship of knowledge. We've touched on the Enneagram of things just a little bit. We have touched on decoding
So, what made you attracted to the Enneagram, Wichita?
it was weird.
It's weird. That's
It's weird.
yeah.
Yeah, I was fascinated by it from the moment I saw it, which was like back in 1967, in Search of the Miraculous, and it was like, wow, this is cool.
Yeah. So that's the book by
Ouspensky.
Spensky. Yes. Yeah. Who was a direct student of Gurdjieff's.
Yeah. And got the Enneagram material directly from Gurdjieff. So these are why we use the Enneagram. And in our in the way we train people, we teach and use over time all of the different kinds of Enneagrams that you can use, at least the ones that we know. And it's quite possible for people to discover other methodologies of using it. So it's an open-ended sort of thing. There is no end to the knowledge that one can glean through this symbol if you're clever enough. And I keep using that phrase because you have to learn to think for yourself with this.
So there's creativity involved.
Yes,
And not only creativity, but the ability to observe and be able to and willing to recognize connections between things. And to draw conclusions from those observations that make sense and fit the data.
exactly right. And realize that it is the primary tool of the work, more than anything else, more than um, everything other than the first exercise becomes informed by your understanding of the Enneagram. And even that, when you start getting into deeper layers of it, becomes informed.
First exercise, the breath practice,
Yes,
the fundamental breath.
breathe consciously. And you'll notice that those precepts also sit on an Enneagram. And that's one of the ways that you can understand the relationship of knowledge in them.
And you'll be able to check those out through our playlist called The 9 Precepts.
Yep.
All right, so David asks, how about Enneagrams or processes interacting with each other? In the expansion/contraction talk, that's one we did a couple weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
I remember us touching on the fact that you will be expanding or contracting at an adjacent or concurrent Enneagrams or processes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one way that I think about it is that we have the circle of the Enneagram, and then on the edge of that circle, you have all kinds of other Enneagrams going that intersect and spiral through the one that you're currently giving your attention to.
And you start learning that by looking at the triangle, because each point of that triangle will connect with a totally different Enneagram. And each of those processes in those three Enneagrams inform the process of your Enneagram. And of course, there are 3 points of contact in those Enneagrams, and it just explodes out
Yeah.
in
So
space.
it's fractal, in
Yes.
fact. Yes. Fractal meaning it's Enneagrams all the way down and all the way up.
Yep. And then it gets interesting when you bring it into three-dimensional space, because we're looking at a two-dimensional Enneagram, but it's actually not two-dimensional. And it's not three-dimensional, it's probably four-dimensional, but that's hard to visualize. But it's not so hard to visualize a three-dimensional Enneagram. How would you do that? I should have done a drawing of that, but I didn't think to. Maybe I'll do that. I've got to use a 3D rendering program to even begin to draw it the way it needs to look. Think of on the Enneagram, there is the triangle. Now imagine taking 3 more triangles and setting them on the triangle that is on the horizontal plane in such a way that the triangles form a tetrahedron.
Basically. Well,
But
a 3-sided pyramid.
yeah, that's one way.
Sided. Wait, no. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, hang on for a second here.
Gonna take a picture. Gonna find a picture.
Yep.
It's a good idea. This is a good question, though, David, because I think this gets at to it being bigger than, our narrow focus of what's in front of us as opposed to what's happening beyond that, outside that experience. And it's important for us to start thinking about that, given how everything is interacting with everything else at any given time. And we can take that for granted even if we aren't necessarily conscious of it or giving our attention to it.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen here. This is a tetrahedron,
Yes.
and you will notice that it's triangles all the way around. And you have 1, 2, 3, and then the last face 4 triangles that make this up. And that's why it's tetra. Tetra is 4.
Yes.
So it means 4 triangles. And this is the first stable shape in 3 dimensions. It's one of the Platonic solids.
So we can
Now,
think of this as a pointy prism.
yes, but you can think of each of these triangles as the triangle point in the center of 4 different Enneagrams.
So each of these faces, the one on the bottom, the one in the back, the one to the side, and the one facing us, each of those are Enneagrams happening at the same time.
Yes, and each of them are interconnected in very weird and esoteric ways. And this is how you do them in 3 dimensions. This is stuff that I wasn't meaning to talk about, but why not?
Well, I think it gets into the level of complexity that the symbol carries. It's not to be taken at face value.
Yeah, so let me get rid of this. And we can definitely say that building an Enneagram like that in 3 dimensions would it begins to get you to understand the connections within connections within connections that are being manifest all the time, because nothing is static here.
So, JS says, so pyramids are built based on science of the Enneagram?
Depends on what you're talking about. The Great Pyramid is not a tetrahedron because its base is 4, not 3.
Yeah, it's a square with 4 triangles on
Yeah,
each side of that
it's at a
square.
higher level of complexity than a tetrahedron. But yeah, you would say Enneagrams are based on the science of pyramids. You could say that too. Could go both ways.
So Sydney asks, can a single Enneagram be looked at differently, like looking at the Enneagram of fixation as being a process or using it for decoding?
Absolutely yes. And that's the one thing that these Enneagram of personality people don't do, is look at the fixations as one process in the existence of an individual, which is unfortunate.
No, it's like getting stuck in a process, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we're familiar with the fixations, then we can kind of see how that makes sense in the context of how each fixation gets wrapped up in itself and what happens when that occurs. So I hope that makes sense, Sydney, as a starting point. Yeah, good.
So, what do you think? This is basically all I had to say about it today. Is just this is why we use the Enneagram. This is to perk your interest and to get you to go back and look over some of the Enneagram lectures that we've done and begin to incorporate that into your practice and experience. And if you can't pick up enough, we will do one of those $5,000 courses.
Yes.
But I'd rather just give it away for free. So don't make me charge money for this stuff. Get it on your own.
No, it is valuable.
It's priceless.
All right, so I guess I'll check in with everybody.
Check in with
David,
everybody and then let's
what do
go
you
eat.
think? Yeah.
I'm just getting into the Enneagram myself. It's pretty cool. Other people should too.
Thanks for the endorsement, David. McQueen, you still think this is cool?
It's still cool.
Yay!
Yay.
I'm still taxing away over here. You're doing great. Show's great.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I'm sure you're doing great on those taxes, buddy. Keep up the good
Some
work.
years ago, my students actually used the Enneagram to develop a decoder ring.
Really?
Yeah, it was called the Handy Dandy Dial-A-Rite, R-I-T-E, right. And it
Right?
was for
Yeah.
creating ceremonies. You could, there were things around it that were movable, and you could spin the inner circles of the Enneagram and look at the different points in different ways and come out with just the proper ceremony to do for whatever it was that you were working on.
Man, I want to see this thing. That sounds cool.
Cherie still has one, not
Yeah.
Australian Cherie, but
Right.
Cherie. Yeah.
Fox friend Shuri, who is a very fascinating person, by the way.
Yeah. We may have to remake them at some point.
All right. Is that Jonathan there? Is Jonathan hanging out? Is he able to chime in?
Yeah, I have some understanding of the law of three, which would be the triangle,
Yes.
and I have some understanding of the law of seven.
Or those
which,
green lines, yeah.
the octave. But I just am not clever enough to really understand the significance of position 8, and let alone the moving lines, how they all work. But not that I'm giving up on this. I'm just taking it very cautiously.
Mm-hmm. That's the spirit, though, Jonathan. I feel like it took me time to understand what I do understand, and my knowledge is always expanding because I'm patient with it. I don't expect to absorb everything in one go, even. So just, whenever you feel ready to rewatch old videos or ask us questions, you can always do that. And we'll do our best to help little pieces fit together.
Yeah,
Jonathan.
thank you. I will.
Vito, what do you think?
okay, Mushtaq removed all the cameras from my house, but he didn't take the one that was in my head, because at the very end of what you were saying, I was sitting here thinking, yes, this is very interesting, and I'm gonna have to go back to those old videos and watch them. And then he
Yeah.
said that, and I was like, so.
Yep. And that's okay. There is nothing wrong with that. This is stuff that kind of emerges through exposure and consideration. And if it's not for you right now, I'm not saying this to you specifically, Levita, but to anyone watching who feels like this is just not my jam, that's fine. That is completely okay. I do think it's worth exploring, and especially if it's something that you feel drawn to, as Mushtaq did the first time he saw it, then, follow that passion and see where it takes you. Jayesh, what do you think?
I think I would need to go through the old videos and learn the basics of Enneagram.
Yeah.
So I can avoid that $5,000 workshop.
Yeah, let's see if we can keep you all out of the workshop. As much as we could use that money, for sure.
Yeah, but everybody could use the Enneagram more than we could use the money, which is why we put it up there for free.
Yeah. Thanks, Jayesh. Definitely check those out. Sydney asks, would you consider transformation as the same as process?
Yes, transformation is a process. All transformations are processes. When you transform wheat kernels into bread, it goes through a process. When you transform liquid water into ice, it goes through a process. When you transform human beings from sleeping automatons into awake adult humans, that's a process. And we have an Enneagram for that.
Zygote to baby in arms. Yeah.
Yeah.
That stuff. You want to add, Bishop?
No, I think I've covered
Everything that's up for this evening.
yeah, that's it. I have figured out all the stuff I wanted to figure out on this. And Sydney says, I'm going to be chewing on this for days. Yay!
Yay! It's pretty tasty if you can acquire a taste for it. Yeah. All right. Well, we've done excellently today. We kept both of our talks within about an hour. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we're trying hard.
Yeah. All right. So let's go into Brady Bunch mode.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's just appreciate each other and wave each other goodbye and say hello and goodbye to everyone on YouTube. Thank you to all of you so much for being here.
And we will see you next time.
Take care, everyone.